Hardback is a hovel.
To really understand the importance of the film movement Dogma 95, we have to travel back time and take a look at the landscape of world cinema in the 1990s. The Hollywood New Wave was over, and the age of blockbusters has begun to dominate the American and even the world market. But because of digital technology, the advancement in digital cameras, personal computers, and the internet have also significantly lowered the budget and quickened the pace of film production, exhibition, and distribution. This meant that even the non-Hollywood filmmakers had a much higher chance to produce and deliver their films than ever before. In such an environment came a force of rebellion attempting to balance the oversaturation of big-budget film productions in the industry by going the complete opposite direction. Danish filmmakers Lars von Trier and Thomas Vinterberg wanted to prove a point by showing that budgets do not define quality. After exploring everything that is possible to be done, and since any awe-inspiring visuals can now be created in cinema, it makes sense that the more important question becomes, what should a filmmaker not do? And that is exactly the next step they took. On March 13, 1995, a Parisian conference called Cinema Towards its Second Century was held to celebrate 100 years of film. At von Trier's turn to talk about the future of cinema, it was then when he first announced the Dogma 95 to the world, a film movement that he and Vinterberg created within half an hour of spontaneous prior discussion. The Dogma's manifesto, Vow of Chastity, was similar to the Ten Commandments. It contained 10 rules about a purer way of filmmaking. 3 years later, in 1998, the first two statement Dogma films, The Celebration by Vinterberg and The Idiots by von Trier, were officially released at the Cannes Film Festival. And the Dogma 95 films has since brought the contemporary Danish cinema its international fame. Similar to the French New Wave, the movement was designed to liberate filmmaking, especially for the indie filmmakers, to find lightness and joy in it, to regain lost innocence. But unlike French New Wave, Dogma 95's aesthetic is extremely raw. The stories are mostly not that romantic. They are messy, gritty, and even darkly cynical. It doesn't have pretty set design, because props and sets cannot be brought in unless the location already has it. It doesn't have pretty cinematography, because special lighting, optical work, and filters are not acceptable. It doesn't have lyrical and expressive film score, because any non-diegetic sound design or music is not allowed. Alain Resnais's stream of consciousness narrative would have been forbidden for the temporal and geographical alienation. And Jean-Luc Godard's deconstruction of popular American genre films definitely broke the Dogma rules as well for the clear genres and superficial actions. Compared to any other movement in film history, Dogma 95 is perhaps the easiest to define thanks to the hard lines drawn by this manifesto. But what good comes out of it? The answer, and the only answer, is authentic human drama. Because the simplicity of the manifesto brings laser focus on the story, acting, and theme. There's less alienation between us and the characters, because the cinematic form is never too overwhelming to distract or distance the audience's attention. But on top of that, the best Dogma films have also developed a set of unofficial filmmaking conventions to emphasize the impact and realism of human drama. Let's talk about the story element first. The first unofficial convention is writing characters in group settings. What's funny is that all of the first 4 Dogma films by the Dogma Brethren are ensemble pieces about a group of people, which happened without any prior discussion between the 4 filmmakers. And this trend occurred again in many of the later Dogma entries like Julian Donkey Boy, and Italian for Beginners as well. Thomas Vinterberg, who directed the first Dogma film, The Celebration, explained the possible reasons why group portraits became such a characteristic feature of many Dogma films. Because if you cannot play on all the subtle emotions and amplify them by using background music, you have to trumpet them out through what is left, which means the cast. The Celebration is an excellent example of this, featuring a large group of cast celebrating a man's 60th birthday party where his son reveals some unpleasant family truths about the father, who used to sexually abuse him and his sister. The story is filled with darkly comical arguments, rude and racist personality, characters holding their secrets, and many uncomfortable public confrontations. The director Vinterberg has painted us a multicolored fresco with the dramatic potential of an ensemble cast, which is already powerful in itself without any added cinematic tricks. This is the simple yet effective formula. When you place a group of people that are just impossible to be together, the result we have is a time bomb that's destined to explode. And that brings me to my next point. The The best Dogma films possess a certain level of madness, a chaotic energy. Some of them have a strange mix of craziness and playfulness, distressing events and dark humor. The Dogma character settings often come with strong inherent dramatic tension. We see characters with an unrevealed past, which often has to do with their family secrets. We see many dysfunctional families.
You just look stupid.
I'm back.
You're just stupid!
Mentally challenged people like the schizophrenic Julian from Julian Donkey Boy, the idiot brother Rudd from Mifune's Last Song, and even a group of normal people who pretend to be mentally disabled in The Idiots. We see outsiders getting repelled by society, like this reincarnated brother from the magical realist film Truly Human, who's treated like a refugee struggling to integrate in the Danish society, and whose kindness towards children is misunderstood as being pedophilia. We see how the sinister side of humanity gets revealed under extreme conditions, like getting trapped in the desert in The King is Alive. We see sexual promiscuity in the giant orgy scene in The Idiots. We also get to watch one of the strangest and most tear-jerking affairs you would ever see on film in Open Hearts. Lies and misunderstanding are commonly used, because they are great storytelling tools to construct both comedy and tragedy. A lot of the dramatic conflicts in Dogma films simply come from how the characters attempt to conceal, grasp, and handle the truth or lies. And this even extends to the earlier and later films by the Dogma filmmakers before and after they enter the movement, like Breaking the Waves,
You liar!
Come along, Bass.
Dancer in the Dark,
No, it's my money. It's the money I had in my box. And you're trying to steal it from me.
and The Hunt.
Så hvorfor skulle hun lyve nu?
With such intense, over-the-top drama filled with chaos, how did the Dogma filmmakers ground the audience and make us believe any of these are real? This is where the Dogma's camera work really shines. The supposedly ugly, grainy, and shaky images give the films a documentary footage look. When you isolate the story of the celebration, it is almost like a surrealistic farce by a director like Buñuel. But the restlessness in the grainy, shaky shots is what offers the shocking story an authentic edge. Now the audience is convinced that they are watching the reality, although at the same time, it is like a crazy home movie that's stranger than fiction. Lars von Trier talked about the importance of this edgy camera work in Breaking the Waves, the film where he first experimented with some of the Dogma filmmaking rules. Instead of choosing a style for the film that's going to emphasize the story, he chose a style that contradicts the story, giving it the least possible emphasis. The style acts as a filter over the story. Like he said, the raw documentary style that are imposed on the film, which actually dissolves and contradicts it, means that we can accept the story as it is. The Dogma method of shooting is so good at bringing reality to any melodramatic, strange, surreal, even crazy and dangerous stories. It is no wonder that Lars von Trier kept this visual aesthetic for many of his later non-Dogma films. Since the Dogma rule states that no props that don't belong to the location shall be brought in, some filmmakers try to make the most creative use of any prop that is available. This can happen in a very playful way, where the characters act out parodies of classic film or play. Whether it's a game that the protagonist plays with his idiot brother in Mifune's Last Song, where he imitates Toshio Mifune's character from Seven Samurai, and wears kitchen equipment as a makeshift costume. Or whether it's the performance of Shakespeare's King Lear by a group of people in The King is Alive. In Seven Samurai, Mifune played a bogus samurai of peasant origins, just like the lead from Mifune's Last Song, a successful careerist who keeps his redneck family history a secret from his wife and father-in-law living in the fashionable modern city. The King is Alive, the most self-referential entry amongst all Dogma films, literally based the entire story on the premise that a group of trapped bus passengers decides to stage King Lear out of boredom in the desert.
Yes, of course. You should have a throne.
The director cleverly forced the characters into a situation where they have no choice but to creatively utilize their surroundings in lieu of sets and props from the original play. And in both examples, the narratives serve as intertextual parallels that make use of the classic film and play as commentaries for human conditions in the respective Dogma films. The final element that contributes to a good Dogma film is the editing. Because Dogma films have such a documentary style of shooting, it is justified for them to employ a documentary style of editing, which means that scenes are edited with regard to the sound, the dialogue, without worrying about the images, whether they are sharp, well composed, or follow the 180-degree rule. More importantly, jump cuts are allowed. This is a technique that's again used the most often by Lars von Trier. Because what's important is not capturing the formality of how events unfold in real time, but compiling a collection of moments in a single space at the peak of their emotional potency. The function of editing here is purely to compress and strengthen the intensity of the performance.
Okay, og frem med alle argumenter. Jo, men det forstår jeg godt, at argumenterne kan være nok så gode, men det nytter ikke, når du sætter argumenter op mod følelser. Og det andet er en teori, og når du sætter det op, så taber teorien altid.
If anything, I think the biggest contribution of the Dogma Manifesto to the world's cinema was that it returned filmmaking to a pure exploration of human drama. It reminds us that sometimes it doesn't matter what framing, shot size, shot angles or lighting you use, as long as the right energy and authentic emotion is captured on camera. Sure, it is not a perfect movement. It is not as revolutionary as the French New Wave, and it may have many flaws. But in the landscape of world cinema where the techniques of creating audio-visual entertainment is getting increasingly excessive, the spirit of Dogma 95 may act as a preventive vaccine. And that's precisely what it did. It is the cinema of restraint, a breath of fresh air.